began to attend Family Constellations again with Sunny. And, at first, the friend at the time who recommended that I go said, "Hey, I go to this thing every week and everyone gathers together and we talk about our issues. And, it's very emotional. Everybody's crying. And then there's someone that'll stand up there and pretend to be your grandma and you'll talk to them." And I was going like, that sounds really weird. It sounds like some Kauai hippie stuff that goes on because we're on Kauai Island at the time, and so I really wasn't that interested, truth be told. And then eventually I went. Sunny makes incredible food, and I heard that there was a dinner, and I was brought in by the food. And I stayed for the constellation session. It was a group session. And I was just there observing. I was just witnessing. I didn't have a process done for me. I wasn't really uh, um, like overtly involved in the process in any way. I was just observing. And it rocked me. I cried like a little baby in the best kind of way because what I was witnessing, right? We have these mirror neurons that allow us to deeply feel and empathize with another person's experience. And what I was witnessing in that constellation, at this point, I don't totally remember what it was. Um, it was so profound and so powerful to me to watch this other person having a process of untangling these dynamics that had existed in her childhood, in her family system. And it spoke so deeply to some of the patterns and experiences that I'd had in my life that it really cracked something open, and I was able to see something new for the first time. And what I noticed in the week following that is I felt different, actually. I had all of these like kind of little mini revelations throughout the week, and very interesting situations unfolded throughout that week that helped me sort of experiment and practice with navigating this particular dynamic in a new way. And by the time the next session was coming around, the next Wednesday, I thought, wow, that was so remarkably powerful. And I did not anticipate that. I want to go again and just see what happens this time. Maybe it was a fluke. And so I went again. I think the second time that I went, they all blend together now. I may have witnessed, I may have supported in the session, but again, it just really was so powerful. And it spoke to these, what I started to understand were these universal dynamics that many, many, many of us experience in our lives. If it's loneliness, if it's isolation, if it's feeling unsafe, if it's feeling, experiences of scarcity or whatever they may be, there's so many. Um, and what I got to witness were other people working out these dynamics that were near and dear to my heart and that really were big aspects of my life too. And I started to realize, wow, when this person heals it in themselves and looks at it and goes through the very vulnerable and powerful process of untangling these knots, something is affected in me too. Like, how does that work? How does that happen? And so I started to become very curious about all of this. And long story short, I began to attend every week for that year. And eventually I had a constellation held for me. And I do remember it was so powerful and so clear. And this process helped me move and address this very um, deeply challenging part of my life. And I was able to recognize the root of the pattern of the issue that I wanted to resolve. I was able to see how my dad experienced that, how it had been communicated through the generations of his lineage, and why I chose to adopt that particular dynamic in my own life. And wow, this was remarkably powerful and remarkably important for my healing journey. And so from there, I was encouraged to keep the process to myself for 40 days and just let it integrate, right? And in that time, I'll tell you what, so many little synchronicities and perfect little moments and opportunities were presented to me by life to help show me more layers of those dynamics. And ultimately, I was able to really make a meaningful change in my life based on this session. Now, I continue to go and observe and witness and participate. I continued to receive constellations and the support of the group container. And over the course of that year, I mean, it genuinely changed my life. I had sat with plant medicine many times prior to that, and where plant medicine had helped open me and helped me see certain things in myself, helped me um, recognize and break out of certain things, I always landed back in them, right? Because we are here in this human realm doing human things. And it's one thing to blast out into the cosmos and have a grander perspective, but then how do we bring that back to our lives and integrate it meaningfully? Truth be told, I had not thoroughly or fully integrated my plant medicine experiences until I began going to family constellations and uh, moving through the particular human dynamics, the very real, clunky, human, egoic, mental, familial, relational dynamics that show up in my life. When I started to move and work with and look at those very seemingly mundane things, that's when things started to change. That's when the integration really started to take root and I saw actual real life changes within myself and within my daily existence. And for me, that's the mark of genuinely helpful. If it's therapy, if it's some modality, if it's plant medicine, if it's some healing process, if it whatever it is, if there's actual genuine, long-standing, stable changes in our lives, to me, that indicates something that's actually effective, something that's actually useful in the long term. Because what are you going to do with the short term change? Feel good for a moment? You know, there's many ways to do that. But when it comes to really diving into the core of ourselves, I feel that it's very important to find the things that create meaningful and lasting, ongoing, perhaps permanent change and benefit within our lives. For me, ancestral healing, family constellations is exactly that. It is literally the most powerfully helpful and transformative modality that I've ever experienced. And through the process of receiving constellations, through the process of then taking a facilitator training purely to originally I really took the training just to support my own healing process because I knew I had a lot to move through. And so through the process of taking that training, being able to apply these tools to myself, sharing about the experiences that I was having, speaking to people so emphatically that they wanted to actually receive a session, started to do some one-on-one sessions and then eventually was invited to do some group sessions way out of my comfort zone at the time. And through that process, about a year or two into maybe even 3 years into facilitating, it dawned on me, it's like, oh my God, I am passionate about this work. This is what a passion is. This is what people feel when they're genuinely passionate about something. You know, I often say there's a big difference between somebody who plays music and a musician, right? A musician is the kind of person that they can't go a day without picking up their guitar, without singing for an hour. It's like they eat and sleep and breathe music, right? And it finally hit me that I literally eat, sleep, and breathe ancestral healing, family constellations, and the dynamics that are involved that we work with through these practices. I'm constantly looking at it because I'm genuinely fascinated by it. And I'm so intrigued and so curious and so interested by how it all works and how it all happens. I literally don't go a day without observing in myself and others the subtle nuances of how we all get our needs met, how we navigate this wild human world that we're in, how we find ways to take care of ourselves, the acts of self-love that we adopt and the different behaviors and mechanisms and defenses and patterns and things that we clothe ourselves with in order to cope with this wild world that we're in. Yeah, in order to navigate the particular dynamics that have shown up in our lives and that are living through us genetically. I find this so fascinating, and I'm genuinely passionate about sharing this, about bringing more people into the awareness of what constellations are and why it's important and how it's so helpful to me and to others. Right. So, my mission, if it's anything, is to expose people to what family constellations are. I genuinely feel that we're in a position similar to yoga in perhaps the 1990s. In the 1990s, there were people who had done yoga. It was introduced to the Western world already. Maybe if you were in a group of people, maybe 1 out of 20 people had maybe done yoga. Maybe 20% of them, 10% of them had heard about it and understood kind of generally what it's about. That's where family constellations are right now. When I have group sessions, usually if there's 20 people in the room, there's usually 2 or 3 people who have either heard about it or participated in a constellation in some small way. Um, Occasionally there's a person who's done a lot of family constellations, and let me tell you, those are the people that are the most excited when they know that there's a session happening, because they go, wow, this stuff is life changing.